At the reading of my husband's will, my stepson laughed and said, "Don't expect a penny from Dad's $87 million." Then he froze when the lawyer spoke my name. His smile slid right off his face. "She's still alive," he whispered, loud enough for the room to hear. I figured nature would have handled that by now. That was the first thing I heard that morning as I stood in the hallway, dressed in black, the scent of lilies still clinging to my coat from the funeral the day before. The house felt wrong, too loud, too busy. Grief hadn't even cooled, and already they were circling like they smelled blood. They came back to the estate not to mourn, not to sit quietly with memories, but to count, to claim, to celebrate what they assumed was theirs. I stayed on the staircase for a moment, my hand wrapped around the wooden railing my husband once sanded, and refinished himself during a winter when business was slow. From above, I watched them fan out through the house, voices echoing, shoes scuffing floors that had once been polished with care. This place had been my refuge. Now it was a marketplace. My grandson, Tyler, was the first to start marking territory. He slapped a bright blue sticky note onto the grandfather clock in the foyer, then another on the leather chair, another on the antique sideboard. "This one's mine," he said each time, like a child calling dibs, like history meant nothing if you could label it fast enough. His sister, Lauren, followed behind him with her phone held up, scanning walls and corners. "Once she's out," she said casually, not bothering to lower her voice, "we can open this up, maybe turn it into a spa space or a wine room, something modern." She didn't look at me. None of them did. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, swept past with a tray of champagne flutes. "We're celebrating Richard's legacy," she announced brightly. "He worked so hard for all of this." Someone laughed. "And now we get to enjoy it." Another voice added, "And finally clear out the past." They clinked glasses. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, no one made room. No one offered a seat. The chair that used to be mine at the dining table was gone, replaced by a flimsy folding chair dragged in from the garage. One leg wobbled. There was no cushion. Vanessa pointed toward the back hallway. "You might be more comfortable in the utility room. Quieter back there." So I went. I sat on a metal stool beside a mop bucket and a cracked sink, a paper plate of cold chicken and dry potatoes balanced on my lap. I ate slowly, not because I was hungry, but because stopping felt like admitting defeat. From the next room, their voices floated in freely. "This place smells old. We should just gut the kitchen. She won't even notice." I felt my hands shake slightly as I held my tea, so I wrapped both palms around the cup to steady it. "She built dinners," someone scoffed. "He built an empire." Laughter followed. What they didn't know, what none of them ever bothered to ask, was that 15 years earlier, that empire had been weeks from collapse. Back then, when the company was bleeding money and the banks stopped returning calls, it wasn't consultants or miracle deals that saved it. was me, quietly, invisibly. I had sold everything that ever mattered to me. My mother's sapphire ring, the gold bangles from my wedding, the bracelet Richard gave me when our first child was born. I told no one. I wired the money straight into the company's account and told my husband only one thing: use it. Don't let them know it came from me. He never told them. He kept his promise. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan and felt the folded document I'd carried for years. Crisp edges, official seals, a bank memorandum dated a decade and a half ago, listing me as a co-founder and early guarantor of the family trust. My name was there in blue ink, not black. That detail mattered. They had no idea. In the living room, Tyler peeled off one of his sticky notes and slapped it onto the cabinet beside me. "This one's mine too," he said with a grin, like he'd just won something at a fair. Lauren stepped in behind him, still filming the room. "This'll be perfect once she's gone," she said. "Maybe a tasting nook." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let them believe what they wanted, because the will hadn't been read yet, and I was very much alive. They thought I was a burden, a shadow, a leftover. They didn't know there was a chapter missing from their version of the story, one where I kept everything standing while they slept, one where silence wasn't weakness, just patience. Let them drink, let them joke, let them measure walls and divide furniture. The lawyer would be arriving soon, and when he did, they were going to learn that some ghosts still have a pulse. They kept talking as if I wasn't there, as if I were already a piece of furniture waiting to be moved. The champagne flowed. Shoes tracked dirt across the rug. I'd vacuumed that very morning. Someone turned on music, too loud, too cheerful, completely wrong for a house that had buried its owner less than 24 hours earlier. I stayed in the utility room longer than I needed to, not because I was told to, but because I was listening. Dad always said she wouldn't last long without him, my stepson Mark said somewhere down the hall. Guess he was wrong. Give it time, Vanessa replied lightly. Stress finishes the job faster than doctors. They laughed again. Easy laughter, confident laughter, the kind people use when they think the ending is already written. When I finally stood, my knees protested. I placed one hand on the sink until the room steadied. In the small window above it, I could see the driveway. The rose bushes Richard planted years ago were drooping, petals browning at the edges. No one had watered them since the funeral. I wondered how long neglect took to kill something that once thrived. I walked back into the house. No one noticed my return. Suitcases were already appearing at the base of the stairs. Someone had claimed the master bedroom just for the weekend. Another asked if they could repaint it. Pink, maybe, or white. Something clean, Lauren said. Not dated like me. I passed the living room where framed photos had been lifted from the walls and stacked carelessly on the floor, glass clinking against glass. 30 years of memories reduced to obstacles in their way. A box sat open by the door. A handwritten label read, "Donation, old stuff." Inside it, I saw my scarves, the ones I wore to dinners, the one Richard bought me in Florence, folded badly, crushed. Clarissa, my husband's niece, stood nearby with a clipboard. She didn't look up when she spoke. "We've decided it's best if you move downstairs permanently," she said. "The smaller room," I blinked. "The guest room," she shook her head. "The laundry space. It's practical, practical." That word again, always used to make cruelty sound efficient. Upstairs, drawers opened and shut. Laughter echoed. I imagined hands touching my things without permission. The dresser Richard built, the nightstand where I kept my journal, the bed where I learned how loneliness could exist even beside someone you loved. I turned and walked slowly toward the back hall. The room they had prepared for me smelled of bleach and damp cloth. A narrow cot leaned against the wall. No sheets, just a thin, moving blanket. My suitcase sat beside it, already opened. Someone had rifled through it. On top lay a cracked frame. I picked it up carefully. It was a photo from our 30th anniversary. Richard and I stood in the garden, arms around each other, smiling the way people do when they've survived something together. The house behind us looked proud then, alive. I pressed my thumb against the glass where his face was, then set it gently inside the suitcase. Footsteps approached. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, holding a folded towel and a small bottle of unscented shampoo. "These are for you," she said, placing them on the cot. "Dinner's at 7. You can eat after. It'll be easier." I nodded. What else could I do? That night, while they ate steak and drank wine beneath the chandelier, I sat on the cot and opened a can of soup with the edge of a key. No can opener had been left. The metal lid cut my finger slightly. I didn't bother to clean it. As I ate, I remembered another night, years ago, when Richard came home pale and shaking. He didn't need to explain. I already knew. The bank had called earlier that day. The numbers didn't lie. "We just need one deal," he'd said, staring at the fireplace. One. He never saw me open the drawer after he fell asleep. Never saw me hold my jewelry one last time before placing it in velvet and walking out into the cold. They called him brilliant after that deal closed. Visionary. Self-made. They never called me anything. Later, when the house finally quieted, I retrieved the folder from the false bottom of my suitcase. Old, leather-bound. Inside were copies of documents I'd kept hidden for years. Agreements, deposits, letters, proof. The next morning, while they slept off champagne and entitlement, I walked 2 blocks to the pharmacy and used the payphone outside. My cell service had been accidentally disconnected the night before. When the line clicked and a familiar voice answered, I said only, "It's time." There was a pause, then calmly, "Come in tomorrow." I hung up and walked back toward the house, past the roses, past the windows where shadows still slept comfortably. They thought they were clearing space. They didn't realize they were giving me room to stand. And when the lawyer opened that will, the story they'd been rehearsing would finally fall apart. The next morning, the house woke up without me in it. No one noticed at first. They were too busy arguing over coffee, over whose turn it was to shower, over why the Wi-Fi felt slower than it did yesterday. I slipped out quietly, wearing the same black coat, my folder tucked beneath my arm like a book no one else had bothered to read. Mr. Alden's office was downtown, a clean, modern building made of glass and steel, the kind of place that smelled faintly of lemon polish and final decisions. I had walked through those doors many times beside my husband, always a step behind, always silent. This time I walked in alone. The receptionist looked up. "Name," I said it clearly, slowly. "Eleanor Whitmore." She hesitated, then checked her screen. "He's expecting you." That alone felt like a small victory. Mr. Alden stood when I entered his office. He hadn't changed much, same careful posture, same eyes that missed nothing. He gestured for me to sit, then waited. He always waited. He had learned long ago that silence made people reveal more than questions ever could. I placed the folder on his desk and opened it. First, the trust certificate. My name sat beside my husband's, not as a witness, not as a dependent, but as co-founder and co-executor. Mr. Alden's eyebrows lifted just slightly. Next, the bank records. 15 years old. Wire transfers. Liquidated assets. Jewelry valuations attached in careful handwriting. "You sold your dowry," he said quietly. I nodded. "Every piece." He turned the pages slowly. "You understand this changes everything." "I understand," I said. "I always have." Then I slid the last item forward, a stack of handwritten pages, yellowed at the edges, the ink faint in places where my hand had hesitated years ago. Mr. Alden leaned in. "This is the IPO framework." "It's the original," I replied, "the one that was mailed anonymously." He looked at me for a long moment. "You wrote this." "I sent it," I corrected, "under a name no one would question." He opened a drawer and removed a thin envelope. Inside was a copy of that same proposal, typed, bearing a signature. E. Sinclair. "Do you still write like this?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded once. "Then we'll prove it." That afternoon, he called in a handwriting analyst. 2 days later, an intellectual property specialist. They compared loops and pressure points, ink composition and timing. They found the original patent filing, still active, still legally attached to the pseudonym, which was attached to me. By the end of the week, there was no doubt. "You're the sole intellectual contributor," Mr. Alden said, closing the file. "The royalties alone." "I know," I interrupted. "That's not why I'm here." He studied me carefully. "What do you want, Eleanor?" I thought of the laundry room, the cot, the neon stickers, the laughter. "I want the truth recorded," I said, "and I want the will read exactly as Richard intended." Mr. Alden smiled faintly. He anticipated this. He pulled out a sealed envelope, thick and heavy. My husband's handwriting covered the front. "She always sees what others don't," the letter began. "If you're reading this with her, then I was right to wait." I didn't open it yet. Some things needed the right moment. When I returned to the house that evening, the energy had shifted. They were tense, less celebratory. Whispers followed me as I walked past. "Where were you?" Vanessa asked. "Out," I said simply. They didn't like that answer. That night, Clarissa knocked on the laundry room door. "The will reading is scheduled for Friday," she said. "At the firm." "I'll be there," I replied. She hesitated. "You don't need to come early." "I know." When she left, I sat on the cot and opened my husband's letter at last. "They won't listen to you," it read. So I arranged for the truth to speak for itself. "Forgive me for how long it took." Tears fell then, quiet ones, the kind that come from relief, not pain. Friday arrived cold and gray. At the law office, they placed me at the end of the table. A folding chair again. My son didn't look at me. My grandchildren scrolled their phones. They thought this was the final act of a story they'd already won. Mr. Alden entered last. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice calm. "We are here to execute the revised will of Richard Whitmore." No one noticed the word revised. He clicked on a recorder. My husband's voice filled the room. "If my family ever forgets who stood beside me when everything was falling apart," the recording said, "then let this remind them." Silence followed, and I sat very still, hands folded, heart steady, knowing the next words would change everything. The room seemed to shrink when my husband's voice echoed through the speakers. It wasn't loud, but it carried weight, the kind that presses against your chest before your mind catches up. "If you are hearing this," the recording continued, "then I am gone, and my wife is still here." A few heads turned, not toward me exactly, more like toward the idea of me, as if I were a technicality that should have resolved itself by now. My son shifted in his chair. "Dad, come on," he muttered under his breath, half smiling like this was some awkward joke. Mr. Alden raised one hand for silence. The recording clicked forward. "I want to be very clear," my husband said. "Everything you believe you inherited was built by more than one set of hands." The smile vanished from my son's face. Mr. Alden reached into his briefcase and slid a printed transcript across the table. At the top, bold and unmistakable, were the words, "Exhibit A verified audio log." "What is this?" Mark demanded. "Documentation," Mr. Alden replied evenly. He turned the page and began to read. "1," he said. "She's still alive." My son's wife sucked in a breath. "2," Mr. Alden continued. "I thought she'd be gone by now." A chair scraped against the floor as someone shifted uncomfortably. 3. Don't expect a penny from Dad's 87 million. Mark shot to his feet. This is ridiculous. That's private conversation. Mr. Alden didn't look up. Recorded on a legally registered home security system. Time-stamped. Verified. He went on. By the time he reached the 10th remark, the room was silent. No phones, no whispers, just the sound of names being stripped of certainty. There are, Mr. Alden said, adjusting his glasses, 412 recorded statements made within 5 days of Mr. Whitmore's passing that qualify under Clause 14C of the revised will. Clause what? Lauren asked weakly. Mr. Alden finally looked at her. The penalty clause. He pressed play again. If any beneficiary speaks ill of my wife, my husband's voice said calmly, $1 million will be deducted from their inheritance per occurrence. The room froze. Mark laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. That's not enforceable. It is, Mr. Alden replied, and it was. He tapped the page. After deductions, your remaining share is, he paused, then spoke the number. It was less than the cost of the watch on Mark's wrist. My son's face went white. This is insane, he said. She's manipulated you. I spoke for the first time that morning. He didn't need my help. The room turned. My voice was steady. Come, you did this to yourselves. Mr. Alden slid another folder toward me. Mrs. Whitmore is not just the primary beneficiary of the trust, he said. She is also the rightful holder of the company's foundational intellectual property. Lauren's phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. That's impossible, Mark said. Dad built that company. Mr. Alden opened the folder. Your father submitted an IPO model 15 years ago. It saved the firm from collapse. He turned to me. You may recognize this handwriting. I nodded. It matches, he continued. The original drafts mailed under the pseudonym E. Sinclair. Handwriting analysis confirms authorship. Silence pressed down again, heavier this time. You mean, Vanessa whispered, she wrote it? Yes, Mr. Alden said. And because the patent was never transferred, the rights revert to her. Numbers followed. Annual figures, royalties, properties. They stopped listening somewhere in the middle. My son stared at the table. You made soup, he said quietly, as if clinging to the last version of me he understood. Yes, I replied. And decisions. Mr. Alden passed me one final envelope. Inside was a deed, a portfolio summary, and a handwritten note. You built this with me, Richard had written. I just stood in front. I stood then. Slowly, the folding chair scraped against the floor, loud in the quiet room. No one stopped me. I buttoned my coat and looked at the people who had already spent my life in their heads. You thought silence meant nothing, I said. It meant patience. Mr. Alden cleared his throat. You will receive formal notice within 48 hours. As I walked toward the door, Mark called my name. Not angry now, smaller. I didn't know, he said. I paused, but didn't turn. You never asked. Outside, the rain had started again, soft and steady. I stepped into it, breathing deeply for the first time in days. Behind me, the room stayed silent. They were finally listening, and the story was no longer theirs to tell. The letter arrived 2 days later. Not to me. I was still sleeping on a narrow cot in what used to be the laundry room, but to them, thick envelopes, cream-colored, stamped with the seal of the court. They were slid under doors, placed neatly on countertops, handed over with signatures required. Formal, final, impossible to laugh off. The house felt different that morning, quieter, not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the strained silence of people realizing the ground beneath them isn't solid anymore. I was pouring hot water over instant coffee when I heard a sharp gasp from the kitchen. "They can't do this," Vanessa said, her voice tight. "They already did," Clarissa replied. I stepped into the doorway just in time to see Mark reading his notice again, as if the words might rearrange themselves if he stared long enough. 48 HOURS. That was the line that seemed to trouble them most. 48 hours to vacate the property. 48 hours to remove personal belongings not listed under court injunction. 48 hours before enforcement. "You planned this," Mark said when he finally noticed me standing there. "No," I replied calmly. "You did." By noon, the house turned frantic. Boxes appeared everywhere, not the careful, organized kind, but the frantic kind, overfilled, unlabeled, half-taped. The same people who had once slapped bright stickers on furniture now argued over what was actually theirs to take. "That lamp was a gift," Lauren insisted. "From who?" Tyler shot back. "It was in the house before you were born." Vanessa tried a different approach. She cornered me in the hallway, her voice suddenly soft. "We were just overwhelmed," she said. "Grief makes people say things." I looked at her, really looked. "Grief didn't make you move me into a laundry room." She opened her mouth, then closed it. That afternoon, Mark tried. He found me sitting on the back steps, holding the cracked anniversary photo in my lap. "Mom," he said quietly, "please." I waited. "I didn't know about the money," he continued. "About the proposal, about any of it." "No," I agreed. "You didn't. You could have told us." I shook my head. "You didn't ask. You told." His shoulders slumped. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. Then he spoke again. "Is there anything I can do?" I thought about the stickers, the jokes, the way he'd laughed when someone called me half-dead. "Yes," I said. "Listen." He nodded, desperate. I stood. "Pack." He flinched. By the second day, the laughter was gone completely. Catherine cried while folding clothes into suitcases that no longer felt victorious. Tyler avoided me entirely. Clarissa moved briskly, efficient even in defeat. Outside, a moving truck idled in the driveway. The roses beside it were nearly gone now, trampled by boots and wheels. I walked through the house slowly as they packed, room by room, not to supervise, just to remember. The living room where we danced during blackouts. The kitchen table where homework was done and arguments resolved. The hallway where growth marks were penciled into the wall. On the antique dresser in the master bedroom, a bright blue sticker still clung stubbornly to the wood. This one's mine. I peeled it off, folded it once, and dropped it into the trash. In the dining room, I closed the piano lid gently. Someone had tried to move it and given up. That was always his, I murmured, and he gave it to no one. Late that evening, when the house finally emptied of shouting and cardboard, Mark stood by the door. "I'm sorry," he said again. This time I believed him, but apology doesn't rewind time. "It's late," I said. "You should go." He hesitated, then nodded. He left without another word. The house fell still, not empty, just honest. I slept in my old bedroom that night. No cot, no blanket that smelled like bleach. I lay on the bed Richard and I had shared for decades and stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet settle into the walls. The next morning, I called the realtor. I sold the house in spring, not out of anger, not for revenge. Some places hold too many voices, and no amount of cleaning can erase what's been said inside them. I moved somewhere smaller, near the ocean, a place where the sound of waves replaced whispers. The royalties continued to arrive. I used some, saved most, and with the rest, I began something new. A fund, not flashy, no galas, no speeches, just help for women who had built quietly and been erased loudly. Because I knew that story. I lived it, and I was done being silent. The house behind me had taught me one last lesson. Roots don't die just because someone forgets to water them. They wait, and when they bloom again, it's on their own terms. The ocean has a way of resetting time. At first, the days felt strange, too open, too quiet. No footsteps overhead, no doors slamming, no voices deciding where I belonged. Just waves, steady and indifferent, as if reminding me that life keeps moving whether you're ready or not. I rented a small white house near the shore. 2 bedrooms, 1 porch, windows that caught the sunset just right. Nothing fancy, nothing to prove anything to anyone. That was the point. The first month passed peacefully. I unpacked slowly, choosing what deserved space. Richard's books, the piano sheet music I kept folded for years. The cracked photo, now placed in a simple frame on my bedside table. People assume starting over is dramatic, loud, emotional. Most of the time, it's just quiet decisions made one after another. Then the calls began. At first, I didn't answer. Unknown numbers. Voicemails left with careful politeness. "Mom, it's Vanessa. Just checking in. Please call us back." "Let's talk." I listened. I didn't respond. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Not legal this time. Handwritten, from Mark. He wrote about regret, about how things had spiraled, how losing the house had fractured everything they thought was solid. Clarissa had moved in with a friend. Tyler blamed everyone but himself. Catherine stopped speaking to half the family, and Mark wrote that he finally understood what it meant to lose something you assumed would always be there. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Understanding is not the same as repairing. The fund launched quietly. I didn't attach my name publicly. I didn't want gratitude or attention, just results. Women who had supported businesses from behind the scenes, widows written out of decisions, mothers who built something real and were told it was family property the moment their voice weakened. The stories poured in, different names, same pattern. I read everyone. Some nights I cried, not for myself, but because I finally understood how common my story was. One evening, while reviewing applications, I noticed a familiar city name. My old city. I hesitated, then opened the file. It was from a woman named Elise, late 40s, recently divorced. She had invested in her husband's restaurant for over a decade, funds, planning, vendor relationships. When he left, the business was suddenly his. She was left with nothing but debt and silence. I approved her grant immediately. Something about it felt like closing a circle. A week later, there was a knock at my door. I didn't expect anyone. On the porch stood Mark. He looked thinner, older. Not physically, something heavier behind the eyes. I didn't know if you'd let me in, he said. I studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. He didn't sit, just stood in the living room, hands clasped. I won't stay long, he said. I just needed to see you, to say this in person. I waited. I was wrong, he said. Not just about the house, about you. I said nothing. You were never weak, he continued. We just found it convenient to believe that. That landed. I don't expect forgiveness, he added quickly. I know I don't deserve it. I walked to the window, watched the tide pull back from the shore. I don't forgive you yet, I said honestly. But I don't hate you either. He nodded, eyes glassy. That's more than I expected. Before leaving, he turned back. You look lighter. I smiled faintly. So do you. After he left, I realized something surprising. Seeing him didn't reopen wounds. It confirmed they were healing. Months passed. The fund grew. Quietly. Effectively. Women wrote back with updates. Businesses saved. Apartments secured. Confidence restored. One email stopped me cold. It was from Elise. She'd reopened her restaurant, renamed it Second Bloom. She attached a photo. A small plaque near the entrance caught my eye. Built by many hands, sustained by respect. I printed the image and pinned it above my desk. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered what would have happened if things had gone differently, if they'd treated me kindly, if the house had remained a home. Then I reminded myself, comfort would have kept me small. Loss forced me to grow. One morning, I received an invitation. A family gathering. Neutral location. No expectations. Just an offer. I didn't respond right away. I walked along the shore instead, feet sinking into wet sand, the horizon wide and forgiving. Some doors don't need to be closed forever. They just need to be approached slowly, on your own terms. And for the first time in a long while, I felt no rush to decide. I didn't reply to the invitation right away. Not because I was afraid, and not because I was angry. It was something quieter than both: certainty. I no longer reacted on impulse. I allowed time to do its work first. The ocean helped with that. Each morning, I walked the shoreline as the sky softened from gray to gold. I learned the rhythm of tides the way I once learned the rhythm of my household, only this time. Nothing demanded anything from me. A week passed. Then another letter arrived. This one wasn't an invitation. It was from Clarissa. Her handwriting was sharp, controlled, exactly how I remembered her. No greeting fluff. No excuses. She wrote that she had lost her job, that things had fallen apart faster than she expected, that she used to believe control was the same as strength, and now she wasn't sure what strength looked like anymore. Near the end, one line stood out. I don't know how to talk to you without trying to win. That, at least, was honest. I didn't respond immediately, but I didn't put the letter away either. I left it on the table, letting it exist without judgment. A few days later, I accepted the invitation. Neutral ground, a quiet lakeside town halfway between us. One afternoon. No overnight stays. No obligations beyond showing up. When I arrived, they were already there. Mark stood first. Catherine followed. Tyler lingered near the window. Clarissa sat straight-backed, hands folded. Vanessa wasn't there. No one explained. I didn't ask. We ordered coffee. Small talk hovered awkwardly, then fell apart. Eventually, Mark cleared his throat. "We don't want anything," he said quickly. "No money, no help, no house." I raised an eyebrow. "You came a long way to say that." Clarissa exhaled. "We came because not saying anything feels worse." Silence stretched. Then Catherine surprised me. "I miss you," she said softly. "Not the version we used. You." Something in her voice cracked, not dramatically, just enough to be real. I nodded once. I missed who I used to be too. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't think words could do that much damage," he muttered. I was wrong. I studied him. He wasn't asking for absolution, just acknowledging impact. Clarissa finally spoke. "I was afraid," she said, and I turned that fear into authority. I thought if I didn't lead, everything would collapse. "And did it?" I asked. She shook her head. "It did anyway." We didn't rehash every detail. We didn't need to. The truth was already sitting between us, heavy but stable. I didn't forgive them that day, but I also didn't feel the need to defend myself. That was new. Before leaving, Mark asked carefully, "Will we see you again?" I don't know, I said honestly, but today was a start. Back home, I felt tired, but not drained. There's a difference. One empties you, the other means something was carried with purpose. The fund reached a milestone that month, enough capital to operate independently for years. I hired a small team, all women, all with stories that mirrored parts of mine. We didn't talk about them much. We just worked efficient, focused, quietly powerful. One afternoon, my assistant forwarded me an email marked urgent. It was from Vanessa. Short, direct. I'm sick. I didn't want you to hear it from anyone else. No details. No ask. I stared at the screen for a long time. Illness doesn't erase harm, but it does change context. I wrote back one sentence. Thank you for telling me. Weeks later, I visited her. She looked smaller, not frail, just stripped of performance. No sharp remarks, no forced confidence. I don't want pity, she said immediately. I don't offer it, I replied. She smiled faintly. Figures. We sat quietly. No reconciliation. No dramatic confessions. Just presence. As I left, she said something unexpected. You won, she said. I turned. This was never a competition. She nodded slowly, as if realizing that truth too late. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the moon climb over the water. I thought about power, how I used to believe it was something taken from me, how now I understood it had always been something I allowed others to define. The final lesson was settling in. You don't reclaim your life by going back. You reclaim it by choosing what comes next and who gets to walk beside you when you do. One chapter remained. Not about them, about me. The last chapter didn't announce itself. There was no dramatic moment, no final confrontation, no sweeping gesture that signaled the end of everything that came before. Life rarely works that way. Closure, I learned, is quiet. It arrives when you stop waiting for something to feel unfinished. It came to me one morning as I watered the small garden behind my house. I had planted it myself, nothing extravagant. Herbs, 2 rose bushes, a lemon tree that struggled at first, then slowly found its strength. As I pressed soil around the base, I realized I no longer thought of the old house as home. It was a place I had lived, loved, and outgrown. That was all. The fund had become self-sustaining. Stories kept coming in, but they no longer overwhelmed me. I had learned how to carry them without losing myself inside them. My team handled most of the work now. I focused on the vision. One afternoon, I was invited to speak, not on a stage, but in a small room filled with women sitting in folding chairs. No microphones, no spotlights, just listening eyes. I told them my story without bitterness, without names. I spoke about invisibility, about how easily contribution becomes entitlement in the wrong hands, about the lie that says endurance is the same as worth. When I finished, no one applauded. Instead, A woman in the front row said quietly, "I thought it was just me." That was enough. Mark and I stayed in light contact. Occasional messages, updates about life, nothing forced. Catherine sent photos of her children. Clarissa sent an article she thought I'd like. Tyler stopped sending jokes and started sending questions. Vanessa's health stabilized. We spoke once a month, sometimes about serious things, sometimes about nothing at all. We never rewrote history, but we stopped fighting it. I forgave them eventually, not all at once, not as a gift to them, as relief for myself. Forgiveness didn't mean what they did was acceptable. It meant I no longer needed my anger to protect me. The ocean changed with the seasons. Calm one week, restless the next. I learned to read it the way I once read moods in a crowded room. But now, there was no fear attached to the knowledge. On the anniversary of Richard's passing, I took the cracked photograph from its frame and walked down to the shore. The wind was gentle, the sky clear. "I'm okay," I said aloud. Not to him, to myself. I placed the photo back in the frame when I returned home. Some memories aren't meant to be released, just honored properly. The lemon tree bloomed that spring. I laughed when I saw the first fruit. It felt symbolic in the least pretentious way possible. Proof that patience works when you stop checking the calendar. Late one evening, I received a message from Elise. Second bloom had expanded. Another location. She wanted to name a private room after the fund. I declined. "Name it after yourself," I wrote back. "You did the work." She replied with a heart emoji and nothing else. That felt right. Sometimes I thought about the version of me who slept in a laundry room and wondered how she would see me now. Not as powerful, not as victorious, just free. Free from needing approval, free from explaining my worth, free from rooms that shrink when you enter them. One last letter arrived months later. No return address. Inside was a simple note. "Thank you for not becoming bitter." I didn't recognize the handwriting, and I didn't need to. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer with the others, not as evidence, but as reminders of roads traveled. That night, I sat on the porch, waves rolling in and out like steady breath. The world felt wide again, not overwhelming, just open. My life hadn't been restored. It had been rebuilt. And this time, every wall, every boundary, every open door had been placed by my own hands. That was the ending. Not loud, not perfect, but finally completely mine.